All right. So Sally Joe flagged this video for me to do a reaction video to. So I watched it live, right? Well, in this recording, and didn't see any of it first. You get to see all my reactions, genuinely, and this is a good example of bad narrative framing and basically outright lies. This is a video on Peter Boghossian's channel with Colin Wright. I've had interactions with both these people on Twitter before, and they just basically want to answer simple, easy questions that I genuinely would like answered. I think they're important. Is the US taking in too many inbreds, right? Startling data on inbreeding, right, with Colin Wright. But the thing is, they're talking about numbers out of the UK in inbreeding, right? They're not dealing directly with immigration, although they mention it, right? It's very dodgy. The whole setting of the conversation is very dodgy. They're using this scientific framework to justify different beliefs and explore different ways of understanding things, for sure. And I just point out why this is bogus and why these two are not the guys to do this kind of work. So I had to split this into two parts. The first part is much funnier than the second part. But I want you to pay attention to the things that I'm talking about. I didn't stop it at every possible opportunity, although I know it might seem that way at first. Fair enough. Because I wanted to see if you'd spot sort of the things I didn't stop for, but on purpose. And in most cases, I just decided like, you're stopping too much. Let's see what the audience will notice. Just to try to help hone your skills, because there's only a few core, patterns that are recurring throughout this talk. And so, hopefully you'll see that in the repetition, and you'll be able to recognize it in other videos, and you won't have to rely on me to watch all these videos and do these reactions and commentaries and all that, because it's quite tiring. And this one was not tiring. This is a lot more fun. But past ones have been really tiring, really taxing. So I hope you enjoy this exploration of sense making and how to understand when people are doing things maybe that they're not good at. So I'm not saying they're intentionally malicious or anything. I don't believe that of either of these two individuals at all. But maybe when they're doing things in a pattern that is a negative pattern for their audience, right? Because I think this particular talk is a great example of that. So I hope you enjoy it. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, all the normal stuff, and let me know what you think. This is a reaction video. I don't really know what to make of this yet, so let's find out.
Why should someone care about biology?
Well, I mean, it's why you should care about science generally. I mean, the science in biology will tell you what's true. It'll tell you something like your chance of having a genetic abnormality if you're marrying first cousins over generations is whatever percent it's going to be.
Right.
Science isn't going to tell you whether that's good or bad. It's just going to say, this is what it is. We can look at just the bad effects that take place in a single generation, like a 6 to 10% drop in your IQ, for instance.
And 6 to 10% drop in your IQ?
It's enormous, for sure.
Wow.
And these are just the things that are easy to quantify, but there's all sorts of things that happen with your genes here.
I'm thinking about what the identitarian left is going to say about this. Well, they almost definitely won't watch it, but I think one of the things that they're going to say about this is they're going to kind of queer it. Like, this is just their culture. So where has the right failed?
Oh, man.
I think that should give us courage.
This is already remarkable. So, science does not tell you truth. I don't know where these people got this from. When I was growing up, this was abundantly clear. Science cannot make truth claims. I don't know when that changed, who changed that, why they changed it. It still can't do that though, so kind of important. Statistics are not truth claims, right? So the odds of IQ dropping 10 points in a child, if you have enough children, is 100%. I don't know what magic they think statistics are doing, but I think they don't know statistics. Nassim Taleb talks about this quite a bit. IQ also doesn't correlate with anything interesting. except at the low end, but then a lot of other things do too. Again, Nassim Taleb covers this. I don't know why these guys are obsessed with this. I have no idea. This makes no sense to me, but this is not a good start to this video.
Exposure to other people's perspectives.
It's moving us in a good direction.
Some on the left are saying that it's racist and Islamophobic to criticize members of a certain population who produce offspring with their first cousins. Give us the biology about this. Talk.
Okay. Why do they care about these members and what they have to say? That would be my first question. Like, lots of people say lots of things. I ignore almost everything that almost everybody on the planet says all the time. So do you, because there's like 9 billion people and you don't even have access to hear what most of them are saying. Even if you're on YouTube all the time listening to as much as possible, fractions of a percent of people is what you're listening to. Fractions of a percent. Why do we care about this one group? What is this group? How do we define this group? They haven't done any of that work. They're never going to do any of that work. And these are these weird people who somehow believe that they're not part of the left, even though they were voting Democrat like yesterday, right? And so they'll do, oh, the left left me. Okay, that doesn't mean you're not still a leftist. In fact, it kind of does mean you're still a leftist. So it's very revealing about you, but it's not saying anything interesting about the world. And it's good to note too that the people that think this way, we'll call it materialistically, are trapped in this materialist frame where they have to have false dichotomy of left and right. They have to have a political, an economic, or a scientific frame to understand the world, rather than just observing the world and accepting how it is, like with the statistics thing. Statistics aren't really all that helpful because you're misusing them badly anyway, but even if you weren't, the odds of things happening aren't going to change. This is just part of the world. So, I mean, you can say, sure, the odds of dying while riding a motorcycle are greater than the odds of dying while riding a car. But do people riding motorcycles who know that still ride motorcycles? Like, I'm not sure what magic you think this has. And it's not, no one is swayed by. Yes, there's whole classes of people who are swayed entirely by what authorities tell them. And these two are very much trying to be authorities in a collapsing institution of academia. Of course, I have a video on the fall of academia. I'll try to remember to link that here. And that's really what's going on. And so they're still trapped in materialism, trying to use materialism to justify their leftism, because they're both still leftists. And again, to be clear, I've reached out to both these guys and tried to talk to them on Twitter, and they no, right? And I know Colin from Clubhouse days, right? But they will not engage with very easy, simple questions that I'm genuinely asking them because I genuinely want to know the answer, and no response, right? So their idea that good ideas are easy to recognize and I'd know them when I see them and I'm open-minded is false for them. And I've been doing this trick my whole life with these people. They believe there's some objective standard that they're using to measure things, and they would know somebody with a good argument when they came along. And I watch them not do that. And I've made good arguments where they haven't been able to engage or haven't decided to engage. Therefore, their thesis is incorrect. It's that simple. I enjoy doing this for whatever reason, and it's no skin off my nose, but in both cases. And that's part of the reason why I think critiquing this video, although it's going to be a slog for me, is totally fair on my part, because I have tried to engage with both these people, right? And they have been the ones not engaging, not me. So I'm going to criticize them when they do something like this, which I haven't seen it yet. On the plus side, sailboat right there on the left. Beautiful. Love it. Fantastic. I love the nautical feel here, actually. Imagine that. Although rugs and carpets, very bad.
I mean, of course, there's an issue biologically with what is essentially inbreeding, is what you're saying. I mean, there's all these mechanisms and behavioral evolved traits that we have to reduce inbreeding, because inbreeding is something that results in what's called inbreeding depression.
Okay.
So genetic diversity is a good thing to have for a species. It helps you, if there's a disease that comes in, it helps you withstand certain diseases. And I mean, the main issue or the main benefit of having genetic diversity is that you don't have a lot of these what are called autosomal recessive genetic defects that come up. Okay.
I'm sorry, autosomal?
Yeah, autosomal as opposed to like your sex chromosomes. So your chromosomes that aren't your sex chromosomes, that aren't X and Y.
Okay.
And so every organism has random mutations in their genome, okay? And many of them are very rare. Some of them, if they're what are called homozygotes, if there's 2 copies of this gene in an individual, this will result in some sort of congenital malformation, some sort of genetic disease, okay? But fortunately, like, those tend to get weeded out of the population due to natural selection. Okay, so they're pretty rare. But if you are decreasing your genetic diversity, if you're marrying someone, if you're having a child with someone who you're related to,
Your first cousin,
for instance, the chances are that you have this bad gene, okay, but it's usually recessive, and so it's not going to result in anything. But if you're having sex and having children with those that are closely related to you, the chances that you're going to encounter this gene again is going to be much higher. Whereas the chance that you're going to get this gene again from someone in the general population is vanishingly small.
Oh, interesting.
And so you marry your cousin, you happen to both share maybe just 1 copy of this gene. That means 1/4 of your offspring are going to have whatever that congenital disease comes from this particular mutation.
and is it?
So, just a quick note here. That doesn't happen that way. This is misuse of statistics. In a perfect world, all things being equal, the math works out that way. But in reality, it doesn't. And as any gambler will tell you, and gamblers know math better than scientists for some reason. Can't figure that out. It's a real puzzlement. Things tend to come in streaks. Like, sorry, but things sort of clump together for whatever weird reason. And so this idea of this, sort of perfect picture, and also you have to be a little careful, because as I think even Jordan Peterson talked about this years ago, right? We are all related more than the math would imply, right? So there is some cousin marriage in everybody's lineage, right? And so the problem really is, if you had 4 kids with your cousin that you married, maybe that's a problem, right? But also maybe not, because that also happens. We can just observe this. This isn't, you don't have to do the math on something that you can observe. There's no reason. You can just observe it and then work backwards to the math, which is the way to use math, by the way. So I don't understand why people do this, but obviously that could be true. I understand why he's doing it. Also, effectively what we're doing here is we're making a scientific argument to justify a moral position. Okay, that isn't going to work. So I'm going to be curious to see where this goes. But effectively, it's important that you understand that that's what they're doing. Like, they're making this scientific argument, right? This is the Izzat distinction that they're apparently bad at, to try to justify some position, either political or ethical position, right? That's effectively what's going on here.
Again, I'm not a biologist, so I apologize. Is it more likely that there will be some genetic anomaly? Is it like cystic fibrosis? Or is it just across the board? Is it like universally true that if you produce children with your first cousins, that you're statistically more likely to get abnormalities?
Yeah, it's across the board. So during pregnancy, you're more likely to have an offspring with like a lower birth weight. You're more likely to have early birth. They're going to be, as I mentioned, they're going to be underweight potentially. They're going to have a higher incidence of all sort of congenital issues when they're born. There's high incidence of congenital deafness, blindness, malformed limbs, things like that. And the thing with like inbreeding, okay, with first cousin marriage, is it's like a genetic wide type of issue. Okay, it's not really, relegated to a single chromosome. Okay, it can happen anywhere over your genome. So you have this smaller and smaller population size. And the thing with this is that it occurs over generations, it compounds. So we can look at just the bad effects that take place in a single generation, like a 6 to 10% drop in your IQ, for instance.
A 6 to 10% drop in your IQ?
It's enormous, for sure.
That's wow.
And these are just the things that like are easy to quantify. But there's
why does IQ matter? What is wrong with these people? I don't understand. Like, maybe, but also, so what?
There's all sorts of things that happen with your genes here. And so it's bad enough in one generation, but if you have a certain community that engages in this, it's like part of their culture, for instance. The thing is, it compounds over generations.
Strap your...
I just want to make something abundantly clear that is missing here. All early hominid tribes were this. It was like, yes, you came from this horrible inbreeding situation. Ultimately, I don't know what to tell you. Also, this common in the animal kingdom. They don't talk about that for some mysterious reason. We can't figure it out. Can't figure it out.
In for this. Count is between 25 to 30%. More stillbirths among immigrants. A rough estimate reveals that close to half of everybody living in the Arab world is inbred.
Okay, so especially if you have a population coming from somewhere else, they're going through like an immigration population bottleneck that decreases the population, the genetic diversity already, and then those individuals are engaged in some sort of first cousin marriage. It's bad enough over one generation, but if this is repeated over many generations, these complications compound. You can get something like 10, 20, 30 IQ drop over generations if this is just allowed to keep going on and on.
Hey, did you know only half of you watching are subscribed?
Just to be clear, because I know that a lot of people are going to accuse you of racism when they will. They accuse you of Islamophobia. They'll accuse you of racism. If we were to wall off the whole country of Sweden and only put the blonde-haired, blue-eyed people in, and then make everybody somehow with a wand only have sex and produce offspring with their first cousin, would we see the same thing that we see among Pakistanis, for example?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing special about Pakistanis having. This is just a aspect of biology. This is general. Any population that is going to engage in first cousin marriage over generations, it's going to just decrease the amount of genetic diversity in your gene pool. You're going to be more susceptible to diseases to wipe out through your gene pool.
BBC's research also discovered that while British Pakistanis account for just 3.4% of all births in Britain, they accounted for 30% of all British children with recessive disorders and a higher rate of infant mortality.
You're going to lead to...
All right, I think I need to point something out here because I hinted at earlier. In the beginning, all human tribes were like this. They were inbred. And yet we managed to do okay at the end of the day. Right? And so it's reasonable to assume, because this pattern is everywhere, and we like patterns here, that what's actually happening is in the beginning, you need that inbreeding, right, with the smaller populations to get to a stable set. And then after a certain point, that inbreeding becomes a negative, not a positive. And the reason why I say that is because it's actually all over the data, which, it's all over the animal data. Yeah, because we don't actually do the data in humans, although you can if you're clever enough with data, like you're a data scientist or something, like I am. And you just feed the data into the damn computer and ask it, because nowadays you can actually just do that. The AIs are amazing. Just grab the spreadsheet. Actually, you don't even have to. You can tell the computer to grab the spreadsheet data and then do an analysis on a graph, and it will actually do that for you. So there's no excuse anymore. So what you notice is that in the beginning, breeding for unique traits, because not all traits are negative, guys. This is another thing they're conveniently leaving out of their little story here. Isn't that interesting? They're leaving that part out. Blonde hair and blue eyes, for example, I would say is a net positive, especially for me if they're female, but that's a personal thing. But yeah, I mean, these are not necessarily, there's positives to this process that they're just leaving out and saying, oh, it's negatives. I'm not taking a position here one way or the other. I'm just saying what they're leaving out, because I'm critiquing their story. I'm not going to weigh in, at least not at this time, of the pluses and minuses. And you'll notice they're using, so the Joe Rogan clips are just using this preconceived moral standard to say that this is bad, right? And so, in the same way, they talk about, well, lifespans increased, and it turns out, no, child mortality dropped. Lifespan didn't move very much at all, actually. But because of averages and the way they're doing the math, right? These large families where, some huge percentage of the large family will get wiped out because nature is pretty harsh. And we didn't have all this protective technology that we have now around heated houses and ways to keep out venomous creatures and dangerous creatures, right? Because we now have that, infant mortality in particular, because infants turn out to be the weakest and most easily preyed upon parts of the human population. Who could have seen that coming? I'm not doing that to be funny. I'm doing that to show you how, if you're not a critical thinker, you'll miss the obvious hints, right? The obvious hint is that, children are more susceptible to death. And if you fix that problem, the mortality rate for everyone goes up, because, the low end, right? The children under, I think it's 5, once their death rate, halves or something, or I think it did more than that, right? All of a sudden, the average lifespan goes up, because you don't have a bunch of small numbers at the bottom pulling the big numbers down. This is the danger with averages, as any good data scientist would know, or anybody who knew anything about statistics. And also, again, if you're not comparing two things and you're just saying this one thing is bad, what are you doing? This is not a critical way to look at a thing, is by just pointing out one side and implying or asserting that it's negative. And interestingly, they haven't really done that. These arguments seem to be economic or ethical, like, there's a high, child death rate because of inbreeding. Well, maybe, and yeah, I'm not a fan, but also, why do you think that's a bad thing? And if you're not looking at what they might be strengthening in the gene pool, how are we doing this assessment as to good and bad if we're just stating one thing, basically, or 3 things instead of all the things? Because, as Colin alluded to, there's a lot of possibilities here. So they're not all negative. Blonde hair and blue eyes, guys. Come on, I'll fight you on that.
The rise in what's called the fixing of certain genetic anomalies, which means, maybe a previously low prevalence of a genetic anomaly. If you have this constant, multi-generational inbreeding, you can make those congenital diseases go up to 100%, where they normally wouldn't have.
Wow.
Yeah, and then this just results in, lower fertility rates over time. It can, having a high prevalence of these genetic disorders, for sure.
Okay, so you'll notice they use the word congenital as though it's a negative. Interesting, right? And if what he's saying is true, that this is just a negative for the population, well, I think the Muslims would have been wiped out already. This is something they do. And possibly, the Pakistanis, the ones in the Middle East, right? But that doesn't seem to have happened. So I'm a bit curious as to why he thinks his numbers support this, when the numbers of the world do not seem to support this at all, right? And of course, the counter argument is going to be, well, they just have lots of children. It's like, okay, but that seems to be working out for them. I don't know what else to say. Like, sure. And so, and even if this is a problem, let's suppose this is a problem, sounds like it's a problem that would solve itself over time. Why are we concerned about it? Right? And the great irony here is what we're really talking about is leftists who are still leftists, although they'll say they're former leftists. It's just a lie that they like to tell themselves because the left left them. They didn't change. I agree. They didn't change. Right? They're trying to justify a change in their opinion about immigration because they've seen something about immigration that's bad. That's why these are about immigrants, right? You'll notice that it's very, it's in the framing of the video, obviously, but it's a very subtle framing trick that they're doing here. So they're trying to justify to themselves, using their favorite tool, science, why maybe they need to switch sides on the immigration issue, right? But they're caught between a rock and a hard place because on the one hand, Colin, opened this up by saying, well, genetic diversity is required and a good thing. Okay, but you've let in a tribe to increase the genetic diversity and it's not working, right? So, that's interesting. They don't seem to be mixing for whatever reason. That should be a big hint, by the way, but whatever. I'm sure if you haven't gotten that by now, me telling you is not going to help you. That's for sure. Should have been able to figure that one out by yourself. So that's problem number one. And so it doesn't work, right? And problem number two is you are exposing that group to greater genetic diversity, right? So your argument about greater genetic diversity working doesn't seem to hold true because it ain't working. It's not that hard. This isn't working. Right? So you're against the immigration, but you're for greater genetic diversity at the same time. You're already caught in a contradiction. We're done. It's over. Bah, logical contradiction. You're completely screwed. And so now you have to switch into this moral frame to get rid of your cognitive dissonance. This is just technical at this point, right? So your cognitive dissonance. Now you've got to get rid of it. You need to justify getting rid of it because you know the immigration is bad. And look, you're not talking about the bad parts of the immigration at all yet, right? You're talking about these abstract moral issues, even if you're totally right about them. A, the problem solves itself, and B, like who cares? Like it's like okay, they went to England and they're insular and they won't breed to fix their problem. Okay. What do you want me to do about that? What do you want anybody to do about that? That's not a solvable problem, right? And in order to do anything about it, you have to take away their personal freedom and tell them who to marry. That's the only actual solution here. Whether you do it in England or in Pakistan, it doesn't matter. You would have to do that, right? Somebody's making decisions about who's marrying whom. And if the decisions are first cousin, that's bad. Maybe we can even agree on that. I don't think so, but maybe. Well, your solution is now you have to have a different system for enforcing these set of rules. And they'll never get to that because they're leftists, and leftists will not enforce boundaries of any kind at any point. They'll whine about the fact that they exist. They'll tell you that they should exist, but they won't actually stand by a boundary ever. So that's what I'm predicting for this conversation. But let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
And this would happen if we did this to blonde-haired, blue-eyed white people in Scandinavia.
Yeah, it happened to everyone. It happens.
So
it's not even just humans. This is like other species too. Like,
Okay.
Yeah, there's so many examples of species going extinct because they go into like this spiral of doom with inbreeding essentially, which is they don't have enough genetic diversity to bring them out of all the malformations that they're having on their genome. And unless they're able to get genes from another population, we see this with like Florida panthers, for instance. They're totally screwed in their population. We bring like Texas panthers over to try to raise their genome, make it more diverse to save this population from total collapse. But it's difficult to do. But that's just with other species.
You should have.
Okay, there's so many problems here. So on the one hand, you're okay with natural selection, right? Because in the beginning, he's already made this argument about natural selection. I'm not, this is not my argument. I'm not saying I disagree or agree with the argument. I'm just saying this was his argument, right? He already said, well, there's all these mechanisms against first cousin marriage due to natural selection. Okay, maybe I agree. Maybe there's all of these facilities already baked into the pie through natural selection that are supposed to prevent this problem, right? And then the implication there is that maybe if you have a set of panthers, Florida Panthers, that maybe they shouldn't be around. Right? Because, like, I don't know. But natural selection seems to think, so I hate talking like this. I'm going to have to take a shower after this video. Natural selection seems to think that the Panthers don't belong here. I don't know what else to tell you. But, you know, it's okay, right? Like, here's the elitism. It's okay if we go to Texas, grab non-Florida Panthers and try to breed them. And he's already, it's a limited success thing. Like, it doesn't necessarily work. Maybe natural selection is trying to give you a hint. I don't really? This is what you're confused about? Why is this confusing? Maybe the natural selection says no Florida Panthers. I don't know. But also, why haven't you considered that possibility? It seems that way, even with stupid human interference. It seems that way. Isn't that interesting? You'll never hear either of these nitwits talk about that. I'm sorry, but there are midwits, and they are not that high up the chain. I'm sorry, they're just not. This is you gotta really not be able to think things through to get to this level. And fair enough. I mean, I haven't talked about Colin before, although, like I said, I've talked to him before. But I've talked about Boghossian in previous videos, and like this guy. There is a guy who can do what he's trying to do, but it's never going to be him. Poor guy.
Florida Panthers. So it's not just a feature, like you're saying that there's a biological basis to think that it's harmful to offspring, independent of if they're Pakistanis or not, if they're Swedes or not, if they're zebras.
If you're a zebra.
If you're a zebra.
Yeah, it's a general biological issue that happens when you get either reductions of population size, whether just because the population went through a bottleneck and was reduced, or inbreeding. Okay, those two things can effectively do the same thing.
Are you comfortable in saying that that's a biological fact?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you haven't just like made this up because you don't like brown people?
Not at all. No, this is. I mean, this would be an issue, I think, that society would have to grapple with no matter what group is doing with this, because it's adding these deleterious mutations to a gene pool, and we all kind of share in this gene pool. And if we have individuals who are having, 2 to 3 times higher rates of going to the doctor, taking up healthcare services because they have these genetic anomalies because of whatever their cultural practice may be, whether it's blonde-haired, blue-eyed Swedes or Pakistani Muslims, it's an issue that needs to be corrected. I mean, we're talking about a 10% drop in IQ, and that's just over, one cousin marriage. And if we're just going to extrapolate that over multiple generations, I mean, we're getting into like Forrest Gump territory real quick.
Wow. Oh my goodness. All the presumed standards. So he did make the economic argument. I figured he would at some point. They care about the economics. You notice what they don't care about here is the people. They haven't said anything about the people at all. They're not taking into account their culture. They're not taking into account their preferences. They're not taking into account all the positives. Like, again, like Peter keeps bringing up blonde hair, blue eyed. And I'm like, there's no downside here. What are you talking about? Like, what? But also, where did that come from? Inbreeding. I don't get it. There are recessive genes involved here, guys. And they're just playing it off. But to be fair, I don't think they understand what they're saying at some fundamental level, right? So far, we have an economic argument and an intelligence argument. If either of these people is qualified to speak about that. Because talk about lower end. Yeah, I got nothing. But you can see the pace of this conversation. It's not towards people. It's not even towards culture. They're just talking about like culture as an agent or society as an agent has to solve this. What? Like, or they're going to run into these problems. Okay, but I've already demonstrated these problems have to have existed in the past. So I don't, look, we've already been through this, and it seems to have worked out okay because I have a computer and I can broadcast on YouTube to an arbitrary number of unknown people. And yet we started from the very quote problem, if it's really a problem, which I'm not sure about that, that Colin's talking about. And they never understand this contradiction they're caught in, which is really funny. It's really funny, I assure.
And what I know that you're not a sociologist, but or cultural anthropologist. What is their explanation for this? I've read a few things about their explanation for why this happens.
Why in the Pakistani community?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of cultural issues. So they have like arranged marriages, for instance, in their family. Often they want to marry within their families for, this family has land, and they want to make sure that different land is kept within their communities. So you have those issues.
They have different causal explanations for why, like the incidents.
Yeah, they also have a caste system, and so you have like populations within populations.
I just want to point out real quick, the land argument doesn't work when they're not living in Pakistan. So is this about immigration, or is it about the general thing that they're doing that's, if they're doing something in Pakistan, like, why do we care? I mean, Pakistan can manage Pakistan. They don't need your help. Or maybe they do, but they don't want it. How's that? let them be.
That are even more sort of bred. And there's actually, people have asked, so you might say, well, how do we rescue some of these populations from this? Maybe we need to educate them about this type of information. If they just knew that they are contributing to their, the deterioration of their gene pool, maybe they'll stop doing this type of thing. But there was actually a study, I think it was the American Journal of Human Biology in 2002, where they actually went to like places like Pakistan and the Middle East, asked people if they were at all aware of the deleterious effects of inbreeding. They had no clue that this was an issue at all. Most of the people interviewed in this survey, they thought that if their child had like a well-known congenital abnormality, they all believed in the evil eye. So they were more likely to think that the evil eye was responsible for this rather than any sort of genetic mutation. And then also when you'd say your child has, cystic fibrosis or some sickle cell anemia, and they would say, well, my other son or daughter doesn't have it, and so they wouldn't be able to put the pattern together, like, well, how could this be from inbreeding if only one of my kids have it? Well, that's just like, they don't understand Mendelian inheritance, where if, your mom and your dad just have one copy of the gene, only a fourth of your kids are gonna have this. But even the kids who don't have like a congenital...
Yeah, see, so many problems. So many problems. So, yeah, you're making a materialist argument, and then when it's not linear and discrete, right, because it's not linear and discrete, you just described it's 1 in 4, kind of, but not really. But they can't deal with that. Okay, maybe they can't, but the education argument, which is what they're doing here, ironically, doesn't work. So it's a little, it's a little strange. Why doesn't that work? Well, because their stock and trade doesn't work, right? Colin can preach to people, and he's been doing it on X forever, all about the genetics say this about gender, and biology says this, and all that, all he wants, but it doesn't work. And it doesn't work in the West among college-educated white people, or college-educated black people, or college-educated anything people, which is a little mysterious. And yet they persist. And I don't know why. I don't know why this is part of their argument. So they went to them with relatively complicated, mathematically sophisticated argument into a place where they think, whether this is correct or not is kind of irrelevant, where they think, according to their system in math, the people are all low IQ, and then they were surprised that they didn't understand the allegedly complicated system. Okay. I guess if that's what's surprising to you, even though your own system would predict that this wouldn't work, I guess it's surprising to you. Okay.
Mutation that is like really detrimental to their health, they're still contributing in future generations to like shrinking the gene pool. Okay, so it's not just like this person got out of it, they didn't have any issue with them. If they're still doing cousin marriage in the future, their gene pool is still small. And so it's still contributing overall to the inbreeding depression in the population.
Okay.
So here's the problem with this. How long has this already been going on for in a place like Pakistan? Can you measure these deleterious effects on the larger population over time? Right? I'm not saying whether you can or not. That's not the issue. The issue is he keeps making this claim and ignoring the time factor. We already should have the data to say what will happen over time, but he has not provided that data. And he's not tested it or drawn any conclusions from it or stated that it even exists, which to me is a little weird. Like, if you've got the data that this thing that has already happened has an outcome of some kind, or maybe a still unfolding outcome, a trajectory or something, why wouldn't you present that with your argument instead of using the argument from, if they keep doing this, these things are going to happen because math statistics that I'm bad at. So you see the problem. It's not just a framing problem. It's an error in logic. It's these actual errors in logic. We have information of whatever quality, kind of not relevant, about what happens over time in these situations already. They're not, to date, bringing any of that into the picture. They're proceeding as though history begins today, and now we know what's going to happen because we know how things are going to unfold, because math and statistics, which I'm not good at and I'm wrong about. So, okay, I guess I really don't understand this.
No one gets out of this.
So please forgive the question. I just want to be crystal clear for people, for readers, etc. So we don't need to posit an evil eye because we have a scientific explanation. So we don't need a supernatural explanation because we have a scientific explanation. And so we can say that I know that there's a thing now where people don't want to criticize the beliefs in other cultures and cultural practices, and they don't want to say anything is epistemologically, morally, or culturally wrong. But we can say with confidence, with an extremely high degree of confidence, that we don't need a supernatural explanation for naturalistic phenomena, in this case, inbreeding. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I just want to make sure I understood this.
This is insane. Who's the we, and how are you determining need? It seems like if you have a low IQ, you can't have a scientific explanation of something. And that's actually where the problem is, right there. The science people want you to think that science explanations are good, superior to other explanations, and required for truth or something, which, they sort of alluded to in the beginning. All of this is false. I don't know what else to say. This is just ridiculous. This is not true at all. Nassim Taleb has a wonderful story in one of his books. I don't remember which one. It talks about a trader who was trading in green lumber. And the guy made millions and millions of dollars, very successful trading green lumber. And it turns out he didn't know what green lumber was. He thought it was lumber painted green. Of course, green lumber is lumber that hasn't been seasoned, right? Or left out for a year. I think it's a year. That's what green lumber is. He didn't know that, but you don't need to know that to trade. A technically accurate and precise definition does not need to exist in order for you to see patterns in the world and take advantage of them, right? Because patterns are object agnostic for a large number of objects, not all objects, but a large number of objects, right? And so the fact that the object changed doesn't mean the pattern changes. And maybe he could have traded some other kind of lumber, right, based on different criteria or other things that maybe needed time, right? We have things that are younger, things that are older, and shifting them around, right? Because time changes their affect or something. Fermentation is a great example of this, right? You know, beer takes time to ferment, and so the value of the things that go into beer changes based on the fact that if it's combined and left alone in the right conditions long enough, it turns into something different. And these little imbalances can be used in all sorts of situations. So what is the imbalance that happened, and why do we care if it has a precise and accurate technical description? What is that going to change? Thinking of it as genetic? I don't think you have any more, or for that matter, less control over the genetics as you do the evil eye. And the argument, of course, is going to be, well, you can control who you breed with. And it's like, but this isn't about individual choice. They've already stated that. So they're already well aware this isn't about individual choice. Arranged marriage, right, based on criteria like keeping certain assets in the family or transferring certain types of wealth safely, right, preserving things. That's the argument. If the evil eye causes a problem or genetics causes a problem, I don't think that's going to change their minds about the arranged marriages, because the motivation for that has nothing to do with the implied bad result or negative outcome that they're discussing. And because they're not actually very good at logic, they can't tell the difference, which is just hysterical to me.
There's no, the evil eye is not a thing. There's not a supernatural cause that is giving someone cystic fibrosis or sickle cell anemia.
So I just want
to. That's a ridiculous statement, actually, which is just funny. I want to be clear about the term supernatural. Supernatural is the technically correct, accurate, and precise term for things that are not within the material realm. Right? You can think of the world materially, and you can think of it, I use the term ethereally. And for very funny reasons, by the way, if you get the joke, that's great. Also funny, but not used as a joke, but also used as a joke. So the ethereal, right? In other words, sometimes through random mutation, which these people in biology and genetics never talk about this for some weird reason, you will get those things. And there is no scientific explanation for how you get cystic fibrosis when it's not in the genome. This is a problem for genetics and evolutionary theory, because they don't want to deal with the non-material aspect of the things that happen in spite of their theory. Right? Well, this shouldn't happen, right? Or they'll invoke statistics, right? It's like, well, statistics is just an observation of things happening. It's not really, it doesn't give you a cause, right? It's just an observation. It's a measurement. So and they're doing inference from that measurement. And so what basis do you have with the fact that cystic fibrosis can happen outside of this genetic bizarreness that Colin's talking about? I don't know. There isn't a scientific explanation. That's why they invoke random mutation. Randomness is, not a scientific thing, basically.
to make sure I repeat that. The evil eye, I'm sorry to do this to you. I'm really sorry, but I just want to make sure, because I know that people are going to be listening to this and they're going to be baffled by this. The evil eye is not a cause of this.
How does he know people are going to be baffled by this? Also, as I've pointed out, the case made does not support the statement made. Because if you do it in reverse, are you saying that all causes of things like cystic fibrosis are genetic? It doesn't work. So they're not. So you didn't rule out a cause by pointing to a different cause. Things can have multiple causes. It's not that hard. So why they find this funny to, they're basically insulting a bunch of people with a different set of beliefs, right? Maybe people who don't believe in the supremacy of science, which makes them much smarter than these two, if you ask me. They're making fun of them and they're laughing and they find this funny. And I kind of don't. I mean, you're assuming that people won't, it's a weird performative contradiction, right? On the one hand, you're trying to make an argument to convince people that this is bad and that something should be done about it, right? Of course, you're not saying who should do what, which would get really interesting with people like this who are individualists, because you're going to have to take away people's choices and preferences at some point to implement this plan. And how that's done and who's doing it they're not going to be able to resolve that. They're leftists. They're just going to freak out and say, well, no, people should do it for themselves because magic or something. That's usually how these arguments go. And on the other hand, you're laughing at the fact that they have this belief and they're not going to be convinced by it, by the argument you've made. So then why are you wasting your time making the argument if you think they're not going to be convinced by it? I don't understand. So that what you're doing is pointless. Okay? So this is intellectual masturbation then, if that's the case. And I don't know. I mean, you can just look at their performance and see the contradiction based on what they're saying, right? And what they're doing. There's lots of layers of contradiction in this so far, and we're not that far through, but let's keep going.
I'm sorry again, I apologize. There are genetic explanations, testable, measurable, demonstrable, and we can turn the tools of science to this problem and figure it out independently of the race or religious affiliation of the people engaged in these behaviors.
I mean, we discovered Mendelian inheritance, or gets rediscovered, in 1900, and ever since then we've mapped out all these single nucleotide polymorphisms that contribute to these genetic malformations. We know what they are. We can screen you genetically for them, and that's some populations. That's kind of one way. Maybe we can try to rescue these populations. If you're going to do cousin marriage, let's at least screen for these well-known variants that if you have them, you will. We can tell the family, if you're going to get married, okay, but a quarter of your kids are going to be missing limbs or something, extreme like that. Do you still want to have children? That type of thing. So we know that.
So now you can see, hopefully, because Colin's laid that case out. They always do this. They always make this mistake. It's amazing. It's reliable. It's completely reliable. He's laid out a case for eugenics, and he's laid out a case for not having children because there's a danger in having children, that they might end up a certain way. And the fact that they believe, but falsely, by the way, which has been shown, by the way, just to let you know, that genetics explains the whole thing and will therefore give you the odds of this happening reliably, we'll say, means that and again, who's going to make this? Are you sure you want to have kids? What a ridiculous question. If you knew the outcome was going to be bad, are you sure you want to do the thing? Sounds like a Tuesday. People do that all the time. and they have to believe you, and now you have tests, and this is insane. You're going to test everybody in Pakistan who's having children or who's going to have children. Really? That's your plan? And then you're going to inform them, and then they're somehow going to make a different decision. What? We know that doesn't work. We've done this before. But you can see how science quickly slides into eugenics and into antinatalism, because scientific arguments do that, because they are fundamentally materialistic, and being, right, birth is part of being, is not materialistic. It's constrained by the material for sure, and science can tell you interesting things about material constraint, although You can just feel gravity and then you don't need the math, for example. But it's supposed to change your mind about being? And this is just an is-ought confusion again, because they all have it. They all have it. It's a disease or something with these people.
Genes. You can do simple tests. You can screen there. It's just going to show up on the genetic scan. You have this gene. If your child has 2 copies of it, they 100% will have this congenital issue.
100%? I thought it was 1 in 4. Where did this 100% come from? Huh. That was a weird switch. I wonder where you got that from. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying prior to this, it was 1 in 4. Now it's 100%. When did this happen?
You know, I'm thinking about what the identitarian left is going to say about this. Well, they almost definitely won't watch it, but I think one of the things that they're...
Why does he do this? What is wrong with your brain? I wonder what these people who I think aren't going to watch this are going to think about this. Why would you do that? Okay. That's the expression of a delusional fantasy. For real, right? I don't think these people are going to watch this, but I wonder what they're going to think about it. What are we doing? What are we doing here? If you don't think they're going to watch it, then why would you bother wondering what they're going to think about it, since they're not going to have thoughts about it because they're not going to watch it? And if you can't work that out, your logic skills are just not good. It's fine. Most people have terrible logic skills. It's just one more example. This is the 3rd time I think he's done this so far. Why are you fantasizing about an event you don't think is going to occur? I wonder what the unicorns will think of this conversation when they don't watch it. The identitarian left, as opposed to what? The non-identitarian left? Are there people who are non-identitarians? I don't have an identity. It's like, the I was a hint, by the way, in case you missed the joke. What is wrong with these people? They're just not good with the thinking thing.
They're going to say about this is they're going to kind of queer it. You know, like the life of someone who has cystic fibrosis is just as, you know, like we shouldn't be, like this is just their culture. If someone suffers from Down syndrome or what have you, or deafness or blindness, that's just as you know, we shouldn't try to minimize these things.
That's true. We shouldn't try to minimize. Like, I don't understand. Everybody on the left was saying that from day one. Yes, we shouldn't try to minimize. That's true. Right. Now, the caveat is they're talking about 2 different things, and Peter just doesn't know this for whatever reason. I feel bad for the guy. I bet he's fun to hang out with, but my goodness, is he out of his depth? Right? What they mean is, for an individual to have been born in that condition, which, by the way, might happen in spite of genetics. Don't tell Colin, he'll get all upset. You should still treat them humanely. Yes, if that's a quote leftist point, which I don't think it is, that is still true. What you're talking about is, and this is a general for specific confusion that he's making here, is we shouldn't do anything at one layer up, at the cultural or societal layer, right? Because of this. Oh, okay. That's a different argument. I don't know that anybody would ever make that argument, by the way. I've never heard anybody make that particular argument, and that doesn't mean no one's ever made it or anything, but it's certainly not a common argument you hear on the internet. They may make the argument of sovereignty at the level of society. That happens all the time. You say, well, it's their country, let them do what they want. Fair enough. But that's not an argument of, oh, this thing which somebody is somewhere is judging as bad, by the way, which I'm still, are these things bad? To be born without a limb is, I mean, I don't know that that's bad. I'd rather have them born without a limb than not born, for example. So, like, what's your standard? Like, they haven't given a standard for good and bad. They're just implying very heavily that these things are bad without really making that case at all. It's a trick. I hate this particular trick. I hate it. It drives me nuts. But this, you know, this is the best they're capable of, to be fair to them. Everyone has their limitations. Boy, do these guys have limitations.
Do you think they'd say the same thing to, like, if inbreeding was at rates somewhere like 70% as it is with a lot of the, the UK Pakistani population, would they be just as
Is that the rates?
as conceding to this? It's just, we need to let people do what they want to do. If it was like white Appalachians in the U.S., I mean,
Yeah.
Well, it is. So I don't know. It certainly seems like we actually have the answer to that, Colin. And the answer is they just treat those people poorly. Because the left, for all their lip service, and it's only ever lip service about how you should treat people, they certainly don't do that. They just say other people should do that. And that's really the tell, right? Are you telling other people what they should do, or is this something you're doing? And quite honestly, the difference, or one of the differences, if you want to put it in a false dichotomy, which I guess we have to talk to people because they can't keep two positive things in their mind at the same time, you could say, oh, well, the people, quote, on the right, they just act out the way they act out, and they don't tell people what they should and shouldn't do. And that's the advantage, right? The people, quote, on the right, or we'll say the people who aren't identifying against, which that's all leftists are identifying against, and not, they don't have a position. That's always the problem.
I think we might see like a difference in how they're treating these. One group would just be like these backcountry hillbillies that need to stop degrading the gene pool and producing all these genetic variants that is causing all of us to suffer more.
And we can.
How does that cause all of us to suffer? I don't suffer because of Appalachia. What are you talking about? Like, where did that accusation come from?
Because they're perceived to be like an oppressed group. It's just like we have to.
Yeah, so there's a difference, right? But the prejudice is still there, right? They're prejudiced against the Pakistanis for different reasons and treating them as an oppressed group so that they can let them in for whatever reason. We don't know what that reason is, actually. I don't think they know what that reason is, to be fair to them. They're a little stupid. Okay, they're a lot stupid on the left, but whatever. That it's a reasonable point. That the problem is that you can't do that comparison. And the reason why you can't do that comparison is because we're talking about Pakistanis in the UK and people in Appalachia in the United States. And so I don't really understand his comparison, and it's all projection. People on the left would say, have they said that? No, I sincerely believe, from the evidence that anybody, I think, has access to nowadays, that they're prejudiced either way against the people they don't like. And they just come up with random reasons, because they are measurably random reasons. They're not consistent, right? For not liking those people. And it's kind of a problem, right? And they seem, on the left in particular, not to mind people until it's a problem for them, right? In other words, they have no problem inflicting something they see as an issue on others who aren't their group. But their group, they want them always to have the same sorts of things all the time, right? Which is a comfort level. And if they come in contact with Pakistanis, for example, that are not of the same class, because in the UK that matters a lot more, the class system, they pretend like, oh, it's a caste system in Pakistan. Yeah, it is. It's a similar thing in the UK, guy. I don't know what to tell you. Where you went to school really matters over there, right? So if they were, forced to deal with this problem, they would become prejudiced against Pakistanis in a heartbeat in the UK. Like, take 2 seconds. They turn on their allies all the time in the left. It happens almost all the time. It happened to all of these people here, right? It happened to Tim Pool. It happened to Carl Benjamin. It happened to Peter Boghossian. It happened to Colin. I don't get it. Like, why is this confusing? The left is unprincipled. Making principled arguments to them is a waste of your time. You're welcome to waste your time however you'd like, but also, this is a waste of time. And that doesn't mean I think no one should ever do it or anything, But let me tell you, these two are not the guys. Sorry.
So we can be equally critical with the tools of science across any group. Appalachians, if this happens in the Appalachians, we can level the same kinds of criticism that this will lead to certain outcomes, and we know that through science. Okay.
Actually, you should know that through observation, but that observation does not lead to the conclusion that you keep insisting, or at least implying that it does. Right, because Appalachia's been around a while now, guys. They definitely have this problem. If it's a problem, right? They definitely act in this way. So I don't know. And obviously Peter's talking about something, again, that he knows nothing about. Why he does this, I don't know. But you could look it up. I don't know. Like, have you tried one of these? Pretty cool. You can talk to it and just ask questions. Just grab Perplexity AI and just boom, you hit the button, right? You start it and you hit the button again and you just tell it what you want to know and it'll grab the statistics. So I don't know, is this laziness? I don't know. I have to assume it's extreme laziness or deliberate ignorance on Peter's part. I'm sorry, but like, come on. At some point, why are we speculating about things we have data on? These are supposed to be the science data guys, and they're not using science and data. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question of whether it should be illegal, and then there's also a question of
legal question. Different. Yeah.
Should this be encouraged? Should we discourage people from having sex with their cousins? I think absolutely we probably should. Legality is a whole other thing. Probably we should if it's
particularly
an
first
issue,
cousins.
Particularly first cousins. Anything closer than that, yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably something we should do.
Okay.
Who's the we? Who's going to do this? Legally, I believe there's stuff in place for this already, at least in some states in the United States. So what are we talking? Again, see, this is the problem with talking about the we. So let's suppose we solve the problem in the UK and we make it illegal. And of course, they just get around it because they just lie about their lineage. And how the hell do you know? Well, the answer is you wouldn't know. So that wouldn't work legally, but whatever. We'll just say we did it legally and fine and fair. Like I'm all for the signal that the law sends. Like I think that's actually a plus, is it having laws, whether they're enforceable or not, does send a signal to people. And that signal is super important. Totally agree with that. But the bigger question then is, what signal are we sending, to whom and why and how, right? Those are different issues, will not be covered here, obviously. But what problem is he trying to solve? Is he trying to solve a problem in the US with Appalachia? Is he trying to solve a problem in the UK with Pakistani immigrants? Or is he trying to solve the problem, which is the culture in Pakistan? I don't know, because you can't tell. And this is a trick that they often play. I mean, to be fair, it's not a deliberate, intentional trick because they're not bright enough to come up with it. Sorry, also. Definitely true. They're just not smart enough to fool people in this way. Right? They've been fooled by it too. They're dealing with an abstraction. It could point to, there's three things right there, right? The problem in Appalachia, the problem in the UK with the immigrants, or the problem inherent in the culture in Pakistan. They're not saying which one they're trying to solve, and they're just using the word we as though they're included. Now, I'm looking at these two guys and, I'm going to go out on a limb and say neither of them is Pakistani. I'm just going to, maybe that's a bold statement, whatever. I don't care. It's my channel. So what we, or as my mother used to say all the time, no word of a lie, what we, white boy, which just always cracked me up. I figured I'd share it with you all because, man, couldn't be more appropriate. This is the perfect thing to say here. Who's the we? And what problem are we solving? Because they're dealing in science, they're dealing in these high-level abstractions about effectively moral issues, what's right and what's wrong, and why. They're using, genetic defect, however they're measuring that. I really, honestly, they haven't made that case yet. They haven't even tried. Did you notice they haven't even tried? They've just implied that these things are bad. You being born without a limb is bad. Like, I don't know. Lots of things are bad. Not being born is bad too. Like, I don't get it. Like, where are we measuring this stuff from? Right? So that's more the issue here, is because they're dealing in abstractions, it's very easy for them to trick you into thinking they're giving you an answer to a specific question when there's no specific question that's been posed. It's been 3 separate scenarios that they outline that, not me. They talked about the culture in Pakistan, right? They talked about the immigration in the UK, and they talked about Appalachia, not me. They brought all these things up. Why they're tying them together, I actually don't understand, because it's very confusing. And that confusion leads people to think, oh, this is a little hard for me to track. They must be smart because I don't understand it. But they have they're very confidently speaking about what they're speaking about, as though they understand it. These two don't understand what they're talking about. That's for sure.
Okay, so that was on the left. Now let's talk about the right. Criticism, the right.
I want to make one more quick point here. So we've seen stuff like this before, where like a certain group gets a pass on some sort of practice they're doing because they're perceived as like an oppressed group. So
yeah.
I had someone write an article on my Substack. The article is called "Is There a Doctor in the House?" But it was referencing a new study that was on transgender populations, specifically trans men, which are females who identify as men. Some of these individuals want to have children because they're biologically female, but the advice on medical professionals is to go off high doses of testosterone.
Okay.
Because if you're taking, if you're pumping your body full of testosterone, people with this amount of testosterone aren't really generally having children. You can lead to malformations in your offspring. They'll have, if they're female, their genitals will masculinize. And they'll have very ambiguous to male-looking genitals sometimes for a female offspring. So this paper was specifically saying that we need to get over our hetero cis-centric view of the world and our fear of having abnormal bodies and abnormal fetal outcomes. It's our problem if we're uncomfortable with a malformed genitals from the fact that you have high testosterone. That's a society problem. That's not anything.
Exactly. That's queering it. That's exactly what I thought their criticism would be.
And now we're seeing, it's a different type of thing, but it's still like the oppressed group gets a pass on doing things that are detrimental to their offspring. And in the case of the inbreeding depression one, it's detrimental to a wider population too. It's not just you're destroying the genital development of your offspring. This is inbreeding is something that's kind of like it's more of a social pollutant, if you will.
Wow. So I just want to take a step back here and give you a bunch of framing. So you'll notice that they seemingly out of nowhere, unless I missed something, but I don't think I missed anything here. They're like, "Whoa, we've been talking about this from the perspective of the left," and I'm like, "Wait, what? We were? Why? I thought you were talking about it from a scientific, quote, objective standpoint, right?" And so, what does that mean? That they then think they can switch and talk about it from the perspective of the right? Well, necessarily, it means that they think they're not on the left or the right, and that they're able to objectively evaluate both, which is absurd. This is the objective material reality. Of course, I have a video on that I have talked about in the past. So why do they think this, right? And they're making this bizarre argument that, look, I'm sorry, but if they were better thinkers, if they were clearer, more logical thinkers, they could figure this out really quickly. The problem on the left has nothing to do with oppressed groups. The problem on the left has to do with making an excuse for wanting the world to be a certain way. Okay? They want the material, we'll say, capabilities of medicine to be able to modify gender at the individual will of the person. Okay? That's what they want. They want that for a number of things, by the way. This is why this frame explains a lot of stuff. It doesn't just explain the weird gender thing that Colin just described. It explains a lot of stuff that they do, right? And so they invent an oppressed group, right? With these weird stories about, well, these people historically have always been oppressed. And it's like, that's usually just bad history or bad reading of history. And maybe it's not that those things didn't happen, but they didn't happen for the reasons you stated. Right? Things can happen for lots of reasons. Things usually happen for more than one reason too, by the way. So it's always hard to disambiguate. Why'd you hit the guy? Did you hit him because he was black? Did you hit him because he insulted your mother? Or did you hit him because he hit you first? Like, and what if all three of those things happened? He happened to be black. He happened to insult your mother, and then he hit you, and then you hit him. I don't know. It could be all three, I guess, right? But again, there's a lot of people out there, and you're going to see them all the time because they're going to talk like this, left and right. They're going to talk in these binaries, who actually, it seems, as near as I can tell, cannot hold two positive things and one negative thing in their head at the same time. They can't do it. So they can only hold two things in their head. One has to be positive, one has to be negative. That framing, that binary framing, you're going to see that everywhere once you get it. You're going to be like, oh, this person's binary framing, that person's binary framing. And they switch binary frames in the middle to make it seem like they're not binary, but they are. They're always only talking about two things. One of them's positive and one of them, and sometimes they flip them, which is just okay, I guess. That makes you unprincipled, by the way, but whatever. At least it's easy to spot. Okay, so this framing issue is a big issue because they're framing themselves as in the middle and able to evaluate left and right, even though, again, I don't know when they made this case for leftists, or I guess the excuse what leftists are imaginarily going to say, even though they're not going to watch this, or I guess that's the best I can come up with.
Okay, you were going to go on to
well, I was going to criticize the right, but I'm letting that percolate. I'm just thinking about the kind of prior.
I was going to criticize the right. Who the hell are you to criticize anybody? You're a nitwit, dude. I hate to break it to you, but I hope he criticizes me. I'll just die of laughter, probably. That's like being criticized by a stray cat. Like, okay, bro.
You would have to have, and the kind of ways you would have to think about problems in order.
What? Have to think about problems? Do you know more than one way to think about a problem? Because you haven't demonstrated, neither of these gentlemen have demonstrated that.
To think that someone with congenital birth defects, that will help them, well, maybe not even to flourish, but there's a kind of radical egalitarianism in all.
What do you mean flourish? Like, see, they just throw out these words, flourish, as though that's a good thing. I hate to break it to you, flourishing is not a good thing necessarily. There are times when a flourish is inappropriate. I don't know what to think. Where are they getting this from? But you can see the language trick they're using, right? And again, it's not a deliberate trick because neither of them are bright enough to do any reasonable level of verbal manipulation on you. They're doing it quite by accident from patterns they've fallen into from being in academia too long and being rebels in academia, to be fair. And they were right to be rebels in academia. Academia was corrupt, but they've misidentified the problem as usual. They think it's material, or at least can be expressed in material terms, like the institution or something. But it's clearly not, right? Corruption comes from people because people suck. Simple. And they suck more over time, which is really unfortunate for people like all of us. Just saying.
Sorts of biological outcomes. Okay, so now I want to criticize the right a little.
Biological outcomes. There are outcomes from biology. Thanks, Captain Obvious. The biology had no outcomes. It's this implication, right? That there's bad things here, and it's all negative too, right? You'll notice it's all negative, except how you say blonde hair and blue eyes. I mean, like, it sounds like a plus. I don't know.
Because I think this is important. Because I think the right largely has gotten a pass on this, and I think they're wrong. And you tell me I don't think the right should be getting a pass on this. So the right is and I also think this is fueling the issue of cousin marriage. The right has criticized. Gavin McInnes went on Rogan. Maybe we'll insert that clip, and he gave the statistic for cousin marriage, particularly first cousin marriage. Again, when you look at the data, it's pretty horrific. It's pretty conspicuous. But why does the right give women over 40 a pass? But specifically, if you have kids at 40, isn't that more likely to produce genetic outcomes than marrying your first cousin?
What? Like, what do you mean the right? I don't think Gavin McInnes is particularly on the right. He sounds like a moderate to me, but whatever. I know you don't have that category because you can only hold two things in your head, Peter. And one of them has to be positive and one of them has to be negative. And sometimes you switch them, like you're doing right now, by the way. Just hysterically funny. I'm sorry, but this is hysterical to me. It's really funny. Oh, I love watching people fumble around and pretend they're smart. It really is a joy to my heart. It shouldn't be, maybe, but hey, we're at where we're at. It's my channel. So yeah. I mean, where is he getting this from? They give them a pass? What do you mean he gives them? Who on the right is giving people, like, who's he referring to? What incidents is he citing? See, these guys talk about science and then they cite no examples. They've cited no examples. They've cited a bunch of statistics. No examples. None. It's shocking. I'm an academic science guy and I'm going to cite no evidence for the things I'm talking about. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying that it kind of helps to bring the goods. You know what I mean? Especially if you're a science believer. Like, I would rather have a religious believer go, no, it's the evil eye, because they're bringing just as much evidence. So why wouldn't I believe them?
Having a child at 40, 45?
Yes, but it's different though. Okay.
Oh, it's different. So the interesting thing about this is, again, didn't do your research, did you? So you're hunting for a critique. So listen, let's step back again. You've critiqued the left. You're hunting for a critique of the right so that you can be what? Homeless? Politically homeless? So you made yourself politically homeless. Okay, that's fine with me. I mean, I don't have that problem because there's moderates in my model, but you do you with your crazy model that's binary. What's the purpose of going after both sides? Like, I don't, like, what are we doing here? And why do we think, and why didn't you do your damn homework? Why do you think that's the same? It's not the same. Period. End of statement. It's not the same.
Walk you through why it's different in a way. So for inbreeding, I mentioned it's autosomal. It's like genome-wide. You have, it takes place on your entire genome, basically, all the inbreeding that takes place. You can have mutations that show up anywhere, and it's going to increase the amount of these genetic abnormalities in the population as a whole.
Oh, they can take place anywhere. Mutations. Huh. So the mutations aren't caused by the breeding. Or are they? Huh. Can they be caused by other things, these mutations? See, again, they're leaving out a bunch of info on how this works biologically and from an evolutionary perspective. They're just leaving out tons and tons of other information. It's not natural selection all the way down. It's not mutation all the way down. It's not, oh, well, the mutations interact if they pre-exist, which is the argument that Colin's made so far. I'm like, but there's also random mutation, right? And there's interactions where genes get switched on and off due to the epigenome. And like, there's all of these other factors, which they're just kind of conveniently leaving out to make this overly simplistic, totally reductionist point, which is why they can't go and look at examples of what they're talking about, of, say, groups and tribes that have, done this for generations, maybe in some cases hundreds of years, right? Because the data on that, and it's not that what he's describing doesn't happen, it doesn't happen reliably and consistently, right? And then that would break his argument. If it doesn't happen reliably and consistently, Now all of a sudden we're into a different conversation. Well, why shouldn't they take that chance that it won't happen to them in Pakistan? I don't know. What's the argument for that? It's not every inbred tribe has these problems. That we already know this, by the way. It's why he's not bringing that up. It's because it's convenient to his argument. And he's trying to make a moral argument from a scientific one. He's trying to bridge that Izok gap. Of course, they're not doing anything like that because neither of them is good enough arguing to do that. But that's what they're attempting to do, just really poorly. If it's critique, if it's not critique, if you don't listen to this video, you're probably not going to notice most of the things I point out. And I'm probably missing a few things too. I hope so. I hope I'm not that good at this. That would be terrible. I got to have better skills than this. Please, please.
When we're talking about like, a 40 to 45-year-old women having kids, it's not like a genome-wide thing that's happening. It's not like sickle cell anemia.
Okay.
It's usually just like these very specific chromosomal issues, like issues during meiosis when chromosomes are dividing. So you'll get more prevalence of things like Down syndrome, of things like Klinefelter syndrome, where you have XY or XXY individuals.
Okay.
And the thing is, though, the rest of their genome, this isn't decreasing the amount of genetic diversity in the gene pool. Your offspring is just as genetic diverse. They just have this chromosomal abnormality. And most of these chromosomal abnormalities that they have are not heritable, okay? And most of these individuals, they also have extremely low fertility rates, so they're not likely to be able to even reproduce themselves. Some can. So.
Okay, so what I want you to notice here is that the attitude that Colin is taking on this is that because this only affects a family and doesn't affect the larger genome, that it's okay. Or that it's less of a crime or something. Maybe it should be less illegal. I don't know. What is their ultimate solution here? I don't know, right? We never determined that. Which is weird, right? Because it just supports this individualistic mindset where it's like, well, people make their personal choices and that's okay. But then again, they're swapping frames for this Pakistani thing and saying, well, people aren't making individual choices. What they're doing is making societal level or cultural level choices, presumably based on some set of beliefs like evil eye, which is, we'll say, more of a religious or superstitious belief than a scientific belief. And what you should really do is just listen to the science, even though they haven't actually presented any. They just presented a bunch of statistics, and they haven't pointed to the good or the bad. They're just implying the good and the bad the whole time, at least so far. I mean, maybe that will change, but something tells me it's not going to change. So I think that's important to note. Like, they are okay with individual choices, but when they move up to analyzing the group, they're not okay with group choices, right? Or things that appear to be group choices. The problem is that group choices are made up entirely and exclusively of individual choices. So they can't square that circle, and they're not going to be able to. So they're just, I've seen these types of arguments actually thousands of times. And they always go the same way and they always end the same way because it's the same pattern and you're kind of trapped. And that's unfortunate, but also it's the same pattern and you're kind of trapped.
That's one difference. Okay, it's not a population-wide effect. There's no compounding issue that you have with inbreeding depression, first cousin marriage over many generations. And I think most people, at least on the right, and I talk to a lot of people there, they're not like telling people to wait until their 40s to have offspring. They generally try to encourage people to start their families at younger ages when they're less likely to have sort of these congenital issues arise.
But still, to be consistent, I understand one is more damaging, the other consanguous. I got that. But to be consistent,
that's false. One is not more damaging than the other. The effects are the same. You're looking at the same thing from two different perspectives. One of them is from the perspective of a society or a culture, and the other one is not. The fact of the matter is that will just grant Colin his silly numbers and statistics, which I disagree with, which, is in the literature, by the way, had you read it. Even if that were true, as I pointed out earlier, over time, that problem would correct itself in the same way that this problem would correct itself, and for exactly the same reason. So, again, why is this a problem if it's self-correcting? And it is self-correcting. It has to be by the terms they are giving. Whether it is or not, we'll say, in the real world, which is they couldn't be further from at this point, is irrelevant. Their argument is inconsistent, and that's what I'm trying to point out. I'm not trying to inject thoughts into their discussion. We'll say more than is necessary, right? But their whole framework is completely inconsistent on this point. Whether we'll say people were making a decision to, have children later, and that led to problems, ultimately with those children being able to breed or something, is the same as the original argument. It's identical. They've just switched frames to the individual frame, we'll call it, from the societal frame. And they're, making proclamations about what is and isn't good at the societal and cultural level, with no credentials to do so, by the way. For what reason, I don't know. They're not in charge of anything that I'm aware of, certainly not at that level. They're not in that stratum of society anyway, right? They don't have any political or, other governmental power. They're not thought leaders, which is really good, because my goodness, that's the thought you're leading. It's a bad news for everybody. They're just pontificating about their personal preference around these things and trying to justify it within this left-right political frame that they've invented. And I mean, they didn't invent it, right? It looks like they've invented it independently, because they're using new terms to characterize, and in new things, like the conservatives are defending women over the age of 40 having babies, which I've never seen that happen. So I don't know you could say, because their argument is pro-life, that also includes women over 40 having babies, I guess. But to characterize that as they're defending women over 40 wanting to have babies is a little weird. I think they're just defending women's right to want to reproduce and then to do so, which is a very broad thing. And this is one of the tricks, although no tricks here. These guys are stupid. Right? People get confused about this. This is stunningly simple. Okay. If you are pro-life, you probably don't care at what age they're having babies. And the fact that you can divide that up and say, well, they're pro-life, and so they're encouraging women over 40 to have babies. I mean, that is a side effect of being pro-baby, I guess. But to characterize it as that is completely intellectually dishonest, just among other things. Also bad, evil, and wrong, but whatever. We'll just stick to the intellectually dishonest, because I know the OMR guys here wouldn't appreciate being, quote, judged in real terms, like bad, evil, and wrong, or judgments in the real world. They'd rather be judged in intellectual terms, like intellectual dishonesty, right? If the other person doesn't see it that way, then characterizing it as that is I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a very tricky thing to do. So, and again, he's brought no evidence, so I don't know. I don't know why he's bringing this up. He looks to me like he's the standard leftist tactic, right? Find some reason or inconsistency, which is ironic because the left is never consistent about anything, that proves that the right is the bad guy. And this is the standard leftist pattern. He's still a leftist. He's just following the standard leftist pattern here.
Why does the right give, again, maybe outside your area, but let me phrase it like this. The right should not give a pass to women in their 40s or 45. They should also be equally, maybe not equally, but they should also criticize that behavioral practice. I don't see it.
We haven't established that the right criticizes the behavioral practice of the Pakistanis. That seems to be a leftist thing to me. I haven't heard anybody on the right talking about this. I mean, other than you could say Gavin McGinn is trying to make a case. Again, he's not on the right. I'm sorry. He just is not. This is not the case. Right? He's trying to use your crappy intellectual frame to convince people that there are arguments that aren't mere prejudice against immigration. Okay. What else is he supposed to do? He's trying to use your crappy scientific arguments to convince you that you're an idiot. I'm not even, okay, I mean, he should do that probably. I'm not opposed to what he's doing. You should go on Joe Rogan and give people, we'll say, a justification for not liking immigration so long as it's truthful. That is a truthful justification for not liking immigration, for pointing out the flaws and problems of, and it's not immigration, it's a certain type of immigration. And this is really where everybody misses on these conversations. This is a 2-second argument. This is why this is what really bothers me. It's a 2-second argument. Okay, immigrants of the past came for a different reason with different facilities. Period. End of statement. So when you talk about, America's a nation of immigrants, which, I mean, I guess you could redefine immigrant to make that true, but it's not true. At all, by the way. But you could redefine immigration as any kind of movement to a new place. Okay, then every other place is a nation of immigrants too. Who cares? Like that. Now it's a universal. It has no value or meaning, or no possible meaning. It's the statement of fact about the world, like the sun rises in the east, gravity holds it to the earth. Okay, everyone's an immigrant. Lovely. Who cares, right? The fact of the matter is that people who came to the United States early, right, we'll say even 50 years ago, did not derive any immediate benefit from landing on our shores. They had to work for and earn everything that they had. That is not the case in the UK. That is not the case in most European nations, because Europe is a continent, not a country. Much like Africa, continent, not country, big distinction, right? That means those people were of a different sort. They had different goals, and they were employing different means. Right? America was seen as the land of opportunity and not the land of handouts. Okay, maybe the UK was always seen as the land of handouts. I don't know. I'm not from the UK, but the people moving to the UK are moving there for a better life. They're not fleeing bad conditions necessarily. I mean, some certainly are. Every country has always taken in people fleeing war. Like that's always been the case. So to say that there's a conservative argument that would exclude that is a lie. It's wrong and it's a lie. And it's an easy to prove lie. It's easy to prove that it's a lie, right? It was largely in the United States, the Republicans that were bringing in people from Vietnam, native Vietnamese and Cambodians who had helped us in the war. Period. End of statement. I don't know what else to tell you. Okay. The Republicans weren't the only ones. Okay. There has never been a time that I'm aware of in US history outside of war where we haven't let people in from countries with war. Like we've always had this asylum argument. Okay. So to make the argument that all immigrants are coming in because they're fleeing war or, bad things at their country, it cannot possibly be true. And it's not relevant, right? We have always controlled the people that come in to this country. The UK should be doing the same, and they're not. And that's creating a problem because those people are not coming for the same reasons that they used to come. And that's very important. Now, in the case of the UK, maybe they are. Maybe the UK was always this free cake and ice cream place with respect to immigration. I don't know. I don't know enough UK history. I'm not going to make that claim. As far as I am aware, in the early 90s, they were very careful about who they let in the country under any circumstances. The only reason I say that is because I tried to get in to visit my friend who's going to school in England, and they kicked me out. They would not let me in. Heathrow Airport was apparently a nightmare back then, of a different sort, we'll say. They held me for 10 hours and sent me to New York City, which, as far as I could tell at the time was definitely grounds for war against the United Kingdom, because how dare you send somebody from Boston to New York City? That is definitely a war crime. There should be an international law against that somewhere. And if there isn't, we got to fix that immediately. So they were very careful about this in the early 90s, and they're not now. And I'll tell you, everybody I was in the room with was not my skin color. I'm just going to tell you, I'm sorry, but I was being held in a room in Heathrow, not allowed into the country. And everybody else there was not, and they weren't all from the same place. Some of them were clearly from either India or Pakistan. I don't know which. It was a very long day. I was being kept up very late, and they have 50 hertz flickering lights, which I can see the flicker of. It was not a fun time for me. Also, they were mean Brits. So something has changed, right? And the reasons, and again, they're conflating all these arguments, right? Like why they shouldn't do this with Pakistan, why this is a problem in the UK, right? And then something about America, maybe around Appalachia, right? But really, they're Americans. So what they're really trying to get at, right, ultimately, whether they realize it or not, we'll say maybe subconsciously they understand this, is what do we do about immigration in America, right? We're looking at examples in not America. That's certainly what the Joe Rogan thing was looking at examples in not America to try to figure out what the dangers are of just letting everybody in and giving them free hotel rooms and free food and free welfare and driver's licenses and all this other stuff that we are definitely doing, by the way, all of which was not available 50 years ago to immigrants, by the way, with a few exceptions. Lowell was giving some of the immigrants like 10 grand or something. And some other services, but that was at the city level. That wasn't at the state level. It might have used state money, but it was at the city level for sure. So you could research this, like anybody can. Again, like I don't know if you have one of these, if you've seen them. They're called smartphones. They're pretty cool. They got the little AIs. You can just fire up Perplexity AI. If you don't have that on your phone, you really should. It's actually quite good. And you can actually, you don't even have to type on that silly little keyboard. You can just actually voice ask it questions, and it will actually give you some of the statistics on this stuff. So why they haven't done their research on the issue that they're actually trying to talk about, and instead are staying stuck in biology land for some weird science academia reason, I don't know. This seems really easy to resolve. I just did it right there in a handful of minutes. It's not that hard. Why are we even having discussion? This is easy. We don't need a discussion. We have the answers. We can have the discussion. That's fine. But these guys can't. It's like nobody who's talking about this seems able to understand. The motivations of the people coming were different, and the barrier to entry was different, and the barrier once you got here was different. And that forms people differently and informs them differently as to whether or not they should come, right? Oh, I'm going to have to work for a living. Maybe I shouldn't go there. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't, right? Oh, I'm not going to know the native language. Oh no, maybe I shouldn't go there. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't. That's valid, right? And oh, I'm going to have to learn the native language, but I'm willing to do it. Maybe you should come here. This seems reasonable to me, right? It can't be the only reason, obviously, but that seems like a good reason. It's not unreasonable. Are we having those discussions? No, we're not having any discussions like that. I haven't seen them anyway. Instead, we get nitwit theater here.
Maybe, I mean, I don't see it at all.
Well, I see people that are generally trying to encourage women to have kids at a younger age, but they would say, if you're older enough, you can have it. They might say, well, you need to be aware of these types of things, maybe prenatal screening, depending on people's views of abortion, you can or cannot, maybe try again with if you have an offspring that's going to have a really serious genetic abnormality due to chromosomes having an extra chromosome or something, for instance. But one thing is, we might know the fact that like this embryo is going to have Down syndrome or something, but if your offspring that you have doesn't have any of these rare sort of chromosome multiplications, they're actually just like 100% okay. Whereas an individual who's a result of inbreeding, even if they don't have like a congenital, like known, named autosomal recessive malformation of some sort or genetic disease, they still have a decreased genome, and so they're still going to be contributing to this inbreeding depression, even if they go on to, have first cousin marriage elsewhere. So
Wow. So we should be subservient to the idea of the genes. The genes are the arbiter of good and evil, according to Colin. Well, that's good to know, I guess, if you're a psychopath. But yeah, I'm not a fan.
The generational compounding isn't the same with, having an older woman having offspring. But I mean, I do agree. We should definitely not be encouraging women in their 40s. Well, we should be encouraging them to have children at younger ages, I would say.
If they want to have children.
And maybe doing prenatal screening to make sure that these offspring don't have any of these congenital issues.
So again, I'm not a
Notice too, he interjected when Colin was speaking. He said, "If they want to have children, you don't want to make them do anything against their will, unless they're inbreeding, in which case you do want to make them do something." see the contradiction? Like, oh, is it? Which is it? Is it that we don't want bad outcomes, or we do want bad outcomes, or we're okay if the other person is, quote, informed about the potential for bad outcomes? Like, I don't understand. And to be fair, these are difficult issues, and they are wrapped up in that set of questions. It's not a set of questions they're discussing, at least not in that fashion. So that becomes the problem, is that they're not discussing the real problem, the real issue at all. They're just discussing symptoms of the problem as though they're the problem. Like, who tells who when to breed with whom? You can't just decide on your own technically, because the other person has to agree. That's your first hurdle. Your second hurdle is, are you the best decider of these things for yourself? Because arranged marriages, a lot of people are starting to talk about, hey, maybe, or they use matchmakers. Yeah, I don't know what's best for me on the other side of the register. Like, what kind of spouse would make a good spouse for me? Because I can only see myself so clearly, and so I need help with that. Yeah, probably a good idea. Maybe your parents aren't the right people to help or whatever, but it can't be no one. Right? But these guys are individualists because they're also materialists and objectivists, so they're going to just go with that. And it's worth sort of noting, the trick of being an objectivist is that objects exist at different scales. So if you're talking about the object of the culture or the society versus the object of the 40-year-old woman, you're still an objectivist. You're just switching objects all the time to justify and validate your points. So maybe I'll at some point I'll have to do a video on how that works. But that's your little preview of an upcoming video, I guess. And I can explain that in more detail in a really deep dive video on that.
a biologist, so please bear with me as I think through this aloud. So if the goal, and I'm not saying it should be the goal, I'm saying if the goal is to decrease the total number of genetic anomalies, then should we not be encouraging people to have children with individuals, like if you're white in Africa and if you're or China, or if you're from China and like, I don't know, Scandinavia, or like, if that's the goal, should we just try to find someone of a different quote unquote race to have children with, if that's the goal?
Okay. So it's an excellent question. Like, although it's misframed, is the goal for genetic diversity or for no genetic diversity? And if so, where is that line? Where is the line of proper amount of genetic diversity? Because you can also have genetic instability where you get different strange genetic effects, right? Where you dilute the population so much that in fact it basically ceases it to function because there's not enough in common, because you can't, as biologists and evolutionary theorists do, you can't divide everything into the material level of reality and come to any conclusions, right? Because if you have no social cohesion, it doesn't do you any good to have some sort of genetic diversity, because people won't be motivated to get together. right? We've seen that actually. It's happened historically. These guys never go back in history and look for counterexamples. It's just totally bad. It's just bad. You got to look for counterexamples, guys. Like you got to do some kind of research. You're just not doing any. You're just speculating about things you know nothing about, by your own admission, which is, I mentioned that in my last video about Peter here. Just loves to speculate about things that he admits he has no knowledge of. It's like, why are you speculating then? Why can't you just be comfortable not understanding something and being like, yeah, I don't understand. I still don't understand how to play drums. Like, it's fine. I'm not happy about it, but I'm also not gonna like have discussions with drummers. What are we doing? Or non-drummers, worse yet, non-musicians. I speculate the reason why I can't learn anything about the drums is like, what are we doing? Why would you do that? You know, maybe it's entertaining, but I'm not an entertainer, so I don't care. Oh my goodness. So yeah, you can see sort of, you immediately run into a problem on the other side. Right? Too much genetic diversity is bad. Too little genetic diversity is bad. Right, okay. That's why I know there's 3 positions and not 2. Wow. Do I have an IQ of 6 billion now? I don't know. Maybe.
No, because like the way that, like, it's not necessarily like if a white person were to have offspring with someone from Asia, like they're a different population. Yeah, they're like genetically diverse in their own way, but really the genetic diversity.
Ooh, they're genetically diverse in their own way. Oh, I bet we're never going to define that, are we, Colin?
It grows from like as you emerge, your genetic distance from like the San Bushmen in Africa, basically.
Yeah.
So they're the most genetically diverse population in the world because that's their kind of like the hotbed of where humans evolved. And we
genetic distance. Ooh, there's a genetic, so we can measure it just like we use rulers to measure distance. Oh, cool.
actually just get lower genetic diversity as you move away from those populations. So
That's interesting.
So you'll have like Asians and white people. I don't know the exact numbers, but you know they're not very genetic diverse. And so if you're having offspring with them, like I mean, there's some genes that they have that we don't have, but it's not really the same as the genetic diversity. You could actually have the same like genetic diversity if you're
Okay,
marrying
so
people from
why
just
shouldn't
horizontally across different populations that have low genomes?
Well, how interesting. So he made the reductionist argument about this mysterious genetic diversity, which he, of course, never bothered to define. And now it turns out that it's a multi-dimensional calculation, which I already knew, by the way, but whatever. I figured he'd get to it eventually, right? Where, even though there's more genetic difference between these two groups, the genetic diversity in the groups is about the same. That's interesting. It's almost like it's a multivariate equation or something. And they're treating it like this nice flat world, like more diversity good. Well, now he's made the counter argument to more diversity good, which is, well, no, because we have the right amount of genetic diversity in these two sets, which are also different. And so there's a genetic diversity between the sets, but the genetic diversity within the sets is about the right amount. Where he's coming up with these standards, I have no idea because he hasn't stated them so far. I guess it's just a personal preference on his part. Probably.
Sorry, I'm bursting with thoughts. Why shouldn't everybody want to have children with a Kung Bushman?
I mean, if you're just like super hyper aware, you just want the most genetically diverse offspring.
So now he's talking about wants, and he's tying the wants to some goal of genetic diversity, which doesn't even exist. Like, so you can see the way the materialism works, right? The material cause, we'll call it, or the material goal, should be the thing that determines the person's wants. Okay, that's materialism, right? You're prioritizing, privileging, preferencing the material line of reasoning or the scientific line of reasoning over the person's wants and desires, right? You're saying, well, why aren't their wants in alignment with this material good? Again, unstated but implied. Everything's very implied here. It's kind of disgusting. It makes me want to throw up.
I mean, That's something an individual can do if they want to. Some people might say that we have localized adaptation.
An individual can do if they want to. And then some people would say, here are the trigger words. These are all trigger words. They all drive me nuts. Right. An individual wants to. Right. But the question was, why wouldn't the individual want to? And Colin says, well, they can or not based on their want. It's like, okay, but you really didn't address the question at all.
For, if we evolved in some location, like if you're an Inuit person in you've evolved a smaller body size, smaller surface area to volume ratio so you can contain heat more. People would say like that's an adaptation for those locations, so it might not make sense for them to, have San Bushman as one of their, to have offspring with them, because their bodies are actually like kind of evolved in a much different way. They're giving off as much heat as possible given where they live.
So this is very confusing. Persons are not evolved. Evolution happens at the group level over very large time scales. And so now we've introduced yet another variable. I'm just going to tell you it's another variable. I'm not gonna try to prove this. Of a geographical, material, utilitarian reason behind a type of diversity within the gene pool. I know that was super hard to track. I understand that was super hard to say. So I have to do this like off the top of my head. So geographical adaptation through generations is a thing. And that creates a different type of diversity outside of this gene pool diversity that also seems to exist, according to Colin, right? And then he said some people would say, and it's like, do you mean if evolution is correct, then we have evolved to fit our geographical environment? Because if that's what you mean, yes. I don't care what some people say. That's not relevant to the fact that if evolution true, and I mean pretty much any of it, then also, right, because it's not optional, right? If evolution is true, it's a true observation of the world, then also it must be explainable by and have explained at the same time, because that's possible, right? This strangeness around how different humans are adapted to the environment in which they find themselves. Okay, I agree. I don't know why some people say, but I don't understand that. It's a pretty simple, straightforward argument, right? Either evolution or not. I guess you could go either way on that. I believe in the truth of the observation of evolution. What I don't believe in is all the inference around evolution that nitwits use all the time, and they're all nitwits. So, I don't know. Not all evolutionists are nitwits, but all the people who talk about evolution and start rambling on about all the implications are inferences. They're not science.
But yeah, so it's not just like genetic diversity is always good. It really depends. It's like an environment, genetic environment interaction. So yeah,
there's just so much antagonism to science. And I never thought I'd say it, but a lot of it's actually deserved. Our institutions have failed us. They've been ideologically captured. I've talked about this ad nauseum.
Excellent. Finally, Peter said something reasonable that I can agree with. Yes, there's a lot of deserved critique of so-called science. He doesn't seem to know why, which is so unfortunate. You could make so much more progress if we could just talk about this correctly. And I don't think he's the guy. I wouldn't mind trying. Peter, if you watch this, I'll try to help you. I don't think I can. So go easy on me, but I would try. I really would.
So a lot of people watching this, and I found, ideologues always go after biology. They never go after electromagnetism. They never go after gravity. Like everybody always goes after biology.
I'm sorry. So silly. That's because no one makes a scientific argument for why electromagnetism does something to people. Right? That's not the argument. The reason why they go after biology is, again, you have to kind of understand the motivations. They're materialists. Biology is the material explanation for all of the things about humans, right? Because the scientific frame for humans is called biology. There isn't another scientific frame for humans. It's biology. There is a scientific frame for groups of humans, right? And that's closer to evolution, right? And groups of humans. Why are groups of humans different? Oh, because they evolved differently, because they were in different geographical situations, right? Because they had different breeding strategies, because there's lots of reasons. But that deals with groups. Biology deals with actual persons, right? One or it can. And you can see in this conversation the way that trying to scale up biology to make these arguments, it just fails observationally. Not entirely, though, right? Of course, there's something to groups of individuals getting together and doing things in lockstep, whether that's bad breeding habits or any other thing, really. But that's different from what happens from the group layer down. So one way to look at this is biology is bottom up and evolution is top down. I don't like that way of looking at it, but it's valid and it's better than any other way that these people are looking at it. That's for sure. So that's a helpful way to think about it. Nobody likes that, because then you're like, actually you are trapped in the middle. But yes, yes, you are trapped actually technically in the middle. That's why I call it middle out thinking. You're reasoning from your own experience and your own experience alone out to the world. Middle out thinking. Right, because you are in the middle. You're between the emergence and the emanation. And people don't like that because it takes away their individual freedom, whatever that's supposed to mean, and then they freak out. But you're not going to use a material argument around particle physics to try to manipulate human behavior. And so, of course, the attacks are on biology. Of course, they're using biology because they're materialists. So science is supposed to be the thing that has the truth, as you stated in the beginning. And so they're using your tool of science, which contains the truth, to justify their belief, right? Or their desire, or really their fantasy. In this case, the leftists are a bunch of fantasy LARPers, effectively. And so that, this isn't difficult to understand. Of course, that's what they're doing. What else would they do? Right? In the past, what the left has done is use religious arguments, right? Because religion was the big frame back in the day, right? And now it just moved to science. So they just switched using the more popular tool. Of course they did. It's the tool that everyone's calling truth or whatever.
So I know that people are going to be watching this, and a non-trivial number of people, they're not going to believe what you say about biology.
I don't know how we can make that statement. I think it's more accurate to say they're not going to be receptive to the statements about biology that you're making. But these are still hypothetical people. I thought they weren't going to listen anyway. And why do we care? Like, why is it our job to make people believe a certain story about why this is bad? Couldn't you just say, well, the gods curse all first cousin marriages? Because quite honestly, that would convince way more people than this complicated biological argument ever will. I'm sorry. It's filters, right? Like they're preaching to the choir, right? They're speaking to their own kind. They're like, or at least their imaginary own kind, because the creatures they believe exist are basically more mythical than unicorns and dragons for sure. See my videos with Sally Joe on unicorns and dragons. Right. These people who are changed by a scientific argument. Very few people are ever changed by a scientific, it's just vanishingly small number. If you count the entire population, which of course they never do, they only count the people that they are already with. In other words, their in-group preference, which is the same mechanism as the in-group preference for marriage. The thing that makes you more likely to marry your first cousin is the same thing that gives you the sample bias around how persuasive we'll call it an intellectual argument could be. How weird. Weird, it's almost like it's the same pattern.
Just not going to believe. There's no evidence that could convince them. So I'm thinking about like the only.
I mean, to be fair, Peter, you guys haven't brought any evidence. I just want to let you know that. Also, you haven't brought any evidence. The closest thing you have to evidence is, I think it actually is Gavin McInnes on Joe Rogan, right? Reading an article written by somebody about, we'll say, the second order effects on a civilized society with an expensive healthcare system. Boy, that's a lot of, like, in other words, those same effects are not felt in Pakistan by the same behavior. Ooh, wow. See, now that would be ripe ground to discuss. Like, maybe these practices are fine as long as you're not doing them in a developed Western nation. Oh no, the horror of it all.
Population that I can think of that's truly isolated are those individuals on Sentinel Island.
Yeah, the ones that kill everyone when they come on the island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so I'm.
Well, as long as he can think about them and he's never actually met them or talked to them or interacted with them, I guess we're in good, solid scientific ground now, huh?
Thinking about, wouldn't that be a kind of test case for this? Like you would think, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just thinking out loud here, but one would think that they would have an extremely high degree of genetic anomalies or percentage of genetic anomalies.
Yeah, you would think so. I don't know what their population size on there is, but it's probably not
extremely small.
Yeah, very small.
But you can't.
It's all speculation. And they can't get the evidence. But, as I pointed out earlier, we actually do have access to that. I don't know why they're speculating about something that, if only they had a smartphone and Perplexity, they could just ask. But hey, whatever. Keep talking, keep thinking, keep thinking. Thinky.
You can't really test that because you'd have to, because no one goes down there.
Yeah.
Because of diseases itself.
Hard to get close enough to get a cheek swab from one of them, I would imagine.
Yeah.
See the trick? A cheek swab from one of them, which would tell you exactly nothing, sample size of 1. Oh, so it's a much bigger problem than getting a cheek swab from one of them. How long has that island been around? And according to Colin earlier, these populations would basically mathematically certainly burn themselves out. And yet that didn't happen there. This is actually one of the examples I was thinking of when I mentioned this earlier. We know that's not true. There's tribes in New Guinea, there's tribes in the Amazon. Like, we have this data. It doesn't happen that way. I understand what the math says will happen, but the math is wrong. Sorry, I just don't know what to tell you. Trying to use statistics to predict the future is a tricky business, and it doesn't work most of the time. Just gonna tell you. And just to be clear, I've done a lot of work on that in particular. So I'm just telling you right now, it looks good on paper, but it does not translate off of the paper or off of the computer.
It reminds me of that Star Trek Next Generation. You ever watch Star Trek Next Generation episode?
I haven't.
You're dead to me. You're dead to me. So I guess that led.
Peter, you're back in my good graces. Saying you're dead to me because somebody didn't watch Star Trek Next Generation, that is, I'm on the fence about Next Generation, but that is still a move that I can respect. Respect, brother. Respect.
Lends itself to a more broader question. Biology is constantly under attack. If it doesn't.
What do you mean constantly? Who's attacking biology? Where is the biology to be attacked? Heck, can they build a fort? Like, what's happening? Sorry, it's so silly.
Comport with someone's preconceived ideological view of the world. And the age-old question is, if someone doesn't value reason and evidence, what reason and evidence can you give them to value reason and evidence?
Okay. I've mentioned self-reference before. This is why self-reference is ridiculous. If someone doesn't value reason and evidence, okay, then there's, by definition, by the first statement, there's no reason and evidence you can give them to change their mind. Period. End of statement. The bigger question is, why would this be important? Because it's all they have. Or it's all they think they have. Although, again, they haven't brought any evidence for any of the claims they're making. So it's ironic. You're not even bringing reason and evidence. Your reasoning is terrible, and your evidence is non-existent, and your reasoning is mostly incorrect by observation, which is way easier and more important. And so, no, there's probably no evidence you can bring to me on that basis. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be convinced. So why did they want this? Because that's what they have. If you think you're good at evidence and reason, then you want evidence and reason to be the thing that moves the world. Okay, that's fair enough. If you think you're the strongest, baddest, meanest guy, you want that to be the thing that moves the world, because that, again, it puts you at the top, right? Like on and on and on. That's all that's going on here. They're just upset that they're not in charge. And there's a reason why they're not in charge. And boy, they wouldn't be in charge on the basis of reason and evidence either. I hate to say it, guys, but like, if we're going to live in a reason and evidence-based world, you're going to be way lower in the hierarchy than you are now. Just warning you now.
Why should someone care about biology? Who cares about biology?
Well, I mean, it's why you should care about science generally. I mean, the science in biology will tell you what's true. It'll tell you something like your chance of having a genetic abnormality if you're marrying first cousins over generations is like whatever percent it's going to be.
Right.
Science does not tell you what's true. A statistic is not a truth. A statistic is a likelihood. This is why scientists can't do statistics, because they don't understand the difference between true and likely. I'm grateful for the clear example. I tried to explain this to people many times. Like, no, statistics has nothing to do with truth. It's everything to do with a likelihood. That's actually the terminology the statisticians use. I don't know what else to tell you. These guys sit there and go science, 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 and then they're using a science incorrectly. An actual science, too, not a wackadoo science.
Science isn't going to tell you whether that's good or bad. It's just going to say, this is what it is, and what do you think about that? Is this something that we want to introduce to society? Do we want to have more individuals going to the doctor more often as a result of first cousin marriage? Those are all like values questions that we ask about this. But you need the scientists to go down and say, well, here's what the risks are for these various things. Is this something we should be concerned about? And I'm kind of agnostic on, should we ban it? Should it be, maybe be discouraged?
Well, okay. If you're agnostic on that, then why bother with the numbers? If you're not going to take a position on something, why have the data about it? Right? Like, if I'm not going to take a position on the Russia-Ukraine war, why do I need to know what's going on in the Russia-Ukraine war? If I don't care what the outcome is, why am I bothering to gather the data? And this is where science gets it backwards. They think that science exists in objective material reality. Jordan Peterson hints at this, right? Like, is mixing Ebola and anthrax, a valid scientific endeavor? It's a hell of a good question. It's like an actual, which I've never heard anybody try to tackle, by the way, which is very telling about the science people, isn't it? Should be, right? So if you're agnostic towards this, why are you even bringing it up? Why are you wasting other people's time if you're not going to give them a determination about what to do about it? So maybe you study how lift works, and now you know how the wing of an airplane works. Okay, that's great. Maybe you learn all the math on that too, which I can't do. Okay, but then you never design a wing. That's just intellectual masturbation. And maybe you need a little intellectual masturbation. I don't know. But also, who cares? What difference does it make? The thing about science is driven from caring to conclusion. Right? You have to care about coming to a conclusion in order to do science. That's actually the missing piece right there. Right? So that's actually super duper important. Fantastically important. And Colin's got it exactly backwards. Oh, none of this matters to me. I'm agnostic. Okay, then who cares? But he wants other people to make decisions and do things in some way or do something. And he's unclear on whether or not that's a government or a person, right? Or a set of persons. This is all ridiculously abstract and vague. It's just hard to tell. What is this about? Like, why are we even having the discussion if he's agnostic to the outcome? And he's saying you can assess risk. You can't assess risk without making a judgment. Right? Again, in Pakistan, the cost of the additional medical attention is 0. In the UK, it's not. In the UK, it's really high. And so you can't just say, as a matter of course, well, for society, this is bad because genome, or because genetic variation or lack thereof. You can't do that. So why are we even discussing it? Right? That lack of genetic variation might be fine for Sentinel Island or for Pakistan or for any number of African and South American tribes, because it just doesn't have the same risk-reward ratio in their societies. However they're dealing with it. And maybe you can disagree with how they're dealing with it. Yeah, we know how the ancient Greeks dealt with these things. And the Romans, for that matter. The Spartans in particular, right? And maybe we have some Western value, although they're United States values, they're not Western at all. Reasons to be upset about that or call them barbaric or whatever. But if you're agnostic, I don't know how you'd be upset about that or call them barbaric or do a risk calculation. Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. I just don't get it.
But the issue really arises with me where you have like the double standard, where it's hillbilly Appalachians when they're marrying their cousin. It's something that they should be shamed for. But when you have like an increasing Muslim population in an area that are doing first cousin marriage, you get these like glowing headlines that are talking about like, oh, the benefits and how these close-knit families now, due to the result of first cousin marriage, where it's like it's glorifying and celebrating it almost, where they wouldn't be celebrating it for the hillbilly population. It's a double standard that pisses me off, not necessarily someone's view on is this something we should care about versus not. It's just like, if you care about it for this population, you should care about it for any population.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, the big reveal is here. He cares about the, quote, double standard. Oh, is that what's bothering you? Huh. How very leftist of you. It's almost like you're a leftist. Oh, that's because you're still a leftist. Never mind. See how quickly I worked that one out? Oh, I'm fast. I'm fast today. This is the irony of all of this. That is only a double standard if all the variables are equal. If they're not equal, that is actually not a double standard. Most of the things that leftists talk about as being double standards are just that they're stupid and they don't understand all the variables involved because they can't intellectually deal with it. And yes, Colin too, and Peter. I'm sorry, but like they're not getting it. As I said, the problems that they've outlined would not be problems in Pakistan necessarily. And so that risk-reward calculation can't be done because that risk never occurs, and therefore the science is pointless. It's pointless. And it doesn't address or solve the problem anyway, because somebody still has to make a change. That change has to be done by one or more agents. They haven't discussed any of that. And if Colin's agnostic, it doesn't matter to him. And this is what gets to the core issue, right? The thing that leftists pretend to hate the most is double standards. But that's not true. What they hate is not being treated the way they want to be treated for no reason at all, right? Without earning it. They're very big on not earning things. Leftists are just huge on never earning anything. And because they want to live in a world where people don't earn things, they're perfectly happy to bring immigrants into the United States and give them benefits immediately upon arrival. See how easy this is? That's the world they want to live in. So that is the world they're going to manifest. And at some point, and they've already done this once or twice, particularly in the past, but even now, they're going to be like, well, see, we give these immigrants stuff, so we should give everybody stuff. So universal basic income for everybody. Okay, even though we have lots of scientific studies that show universal basic income doesn't work. And why? Like, we know why. Like the studies are in, the analyses have been done. UBI is a garbage idea. It's a garbage idea for all the reasons that any thinking person, i.e. nobody on the left, because they're not the thinking people, sorry guys, would understand immediately and inherently upon thinking about it for 4 seconds. Like, oh, you're disincentivizing work. It's not you're incentivizing no work. It's you're disincentivizing work and incentivizing no work at the same time, which is why UBI fails so spectacularly so quickly. Now, I don't expect these people to understand that because they seem incapable of thinking about things from 2 sides at once, even 2 negatives, we'll say. There's a negative over here and a positive over here, and then they flip, maybe, right? But all he's really pointing to is the double standard that people on the left have. And I agree, people on the left tend to have double standards. That's true, because again, they want to manifest a world a certain way. And that necessitates double standards because they're unprincipled people, right? And so they want these things, they can't have them and principles, so they're unprincipled because they want the thing. That's basically what's going on, guys. I hate to, say it's that simple and just leave you with something blindingly simple, but also it really is that simple and it's that blindingly simple. I'm sorry.
And just for the people out there watching who hate you and they hate biology and they think it's some kind of a conspiracy, I think one way to think about the problem, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's predictive. So I know a lot of people are saying we should honor the traditions of communities that think that evil eye is responsible for this. But the evil eye can't predict an outcome. Whereas with an amniocentesis or with other tools in biology, you're looking at me like I'm a complete idiot, but I'm telling you this because we have a crisis of education in this country.
We do not have a crisis of education in this country. Those people are educated to your system, sir. Education just doesn't work the way you think it does. Okay? You can't sit there and have gone on this education push for the past 80 years and then cry about it when it doesn't work your way. Okay? It's better to come to the conclusion that this thing that we were doing that was education did not have the outcome that we thought because we're dumb. And we're wrong about stuff. And we need to figure out what we're wrong about and fix it. Okay? Instead of doubling down on more education, which so far has led us here. There's 100% correlation, okay, with educating people and being in this situation. That's not hard to figure out. You don't need your phone to do that one for you. You don't need Perplexity AI to do that for you. Although you could run the numbers that way and just see that I'm right. It's 100% correlation. Lots of things correlate, by the way. I'm not saying it's causal, but also it's definitely causal. Right? And this is what's frustrating. They've both been bit by this. The education system itself tried to poison the information of other people. And that's what they see as the collapse or issue around education, right? The corruption around education. Correctly, they see that, okay? But that was enabled by the education system. Had you not put the people in that situation, they could not have been informed in that way, incorrectly. The solution isn't more of that, obviously. This is the problem of self-reference. Oh, we're just going to double down on the thing that didn't work. Really? That's your strategy. But that is their strategy because they don't have another strategy because they're not deep thinkers. They're not the best and brightest here. I'm sorry. Neither of these guys, best and brightest, not happening. Not happening. Right? I'm sure they have a place. I'm sure we can find them a place. It just ain't this.
I'm telling you this for a very specific reason because people are going to be watching this and they're just going to hate you.
Yeah, I haven't seen any randomized control trials for the evil eye, but
yes,
maybe we should get on that.
I have. Ooh, you don't want to look at the randomized control trials for the evil eye, Colin. It doesn't say what you think it says.
But maybe they would say even that is a Western concept. even thinking about, even the concept of prediction itself is a Western construct. So, I mean, there's just a point of ridiculousness that...
No, Peter, they wouldn't say that. They would just say our methods of prediction with chicken bones or whatever it is, ashes, tea, whatever, are better. That's what they would say. because that is the battle. The battle is whose prediction method is better. Is it my prediction method of chicken bones, or is it your prediction method of statistics? And there is data on this. It might surprise you.
We always come to in these conversations, like it's like the kid you ask, well, why, and then he, the 5-year-old, and then why. I mean, it breaks down at some point, and then again at some point we just have to relegate these people to the kiddie table because we have tools that enable us to live better lives. Again, that's a value judgment, but so if one does not accept that, I accept that. I mean, I think we'd be much better off if we had fewer people who had cystic fibrosis and were born, they could see and they could hear. And I also, I'm deaf in my left ear. I don't know do you know that?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the things that's really interesting is when you're deaf in your left ear, there are a lot of people in the quote unquote deaf community, that's the most overrated word ever, who don't want to fix the hearing in their children. They think it's actually good to be, it's kind of a naturalistic grounding, or they think it gives them a better understanding of the world. Well, I'm telling you in certain terms, it sucks. But I say that as someone who had hearing in my ear. And so you can ask people who have lost their hearing, and if they've gained it, which do you think enables you to live a better life? This should not be a matter of controversy. But again, if someone does not want to correct their own genetic, their own hearing or their own vision issues, or they don't want to wear glasses, you wear glasses, that's their business as an adult in society. But it's quite different when you start talking, as you said, first cousin marriage in particular, and everybody is ultimately going to suffer from this over time. The whole gene pool is going to suffer from this over time.
Yeah, you're influencing.
The whole gene pool. The poor gene pool. Oh no. The gene pool. I'm so worried about the gene pool. What are you talking about? But you notice too, he said, we have to sit them at the kiddie table. What an interesting phrase. We have to sit them at the kiddie table? Really? Wow. And who's going to do that? Who's going to decide who has to sit at the kiddie table? All the problems of governance come up immediately once you say something like that. Okay, you want an elitist, separated system. I agree. Hierarchy is real and important. That's a conversation worth having. This conversation is completely worthless, but that conversation is worth having. And what things are part of the gene pool? Everything or nothing? Like, do genes affect everything or nothing? Or they only affect things when statistics or something? I don't get it. This frame makes no sense whatsoever. Look, I must put this video into 2 parts because this is long enough. I'll do the second half next. And although I'm probably just going to take an hour break and then come back to this. So the recordings will be back to back for me. But I'm going to split it into 2 parts for you guys. And look, hopefully you enjoyed this first part. And I am fascinated. This is hysterical. This is the most fun I've had doing one of these so far. I feel bad for these 2 guys, but also not too bad because they did it to themselves. And I've reached out to both of them before. They will not engage. Fine and fair. I wasn't surprised. I've been doing this for years. I know these people lie about, I do this to engage and I'm fair. No, you're not. No one is. You can't be. It's a ridiculous position. I just like to prove that and also point it out because I derive great joy from such things. Maybe bad on me. So I will be back with part 2 shortly.